This episode is brought to you by Visit Williamsburg. In Williamsburg, Virginia, there's never too much of a good thing. Whether you're a foodie, a golfer, a history buff, a shopaholic, an outdoor enthusiast, or a thrill seeker, you'll find what you came for here and more. So ask yourself, what is it you want? Discover Williamsburg and plan your trip at visitwilliamsburg.com.
Join all the listeners who are listening right now ad-free by clicking subscribe on Apple Podcast, going to patreon.com/themurderdiariespod, or in Spotify, search The Murder Diaries ad-free.
Welcome to The Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige.
Leona Kinsey told her friend Nancy that she was stopping to meet someone before heading over to her house. But when Leona didn't show up as planned, Nancy grew worried. Her friend was reliable and dependable, and wouldn't just not show up without calling to say plans had changed. So Nancy looked for Leona, but she couldn't find her or her car. Leona was then officially reported missing. This October 25th will mark 25 years since Leona Kinsey disappeared. And unfortunately, there's no sign of a resolution in sight. For this episode of The Murder Diaries, I had the honor of speaking with Leona's daughter, Carolyn DeFord, in an exclusive interview. She gave us insights into who her mom was and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. This is Leona's story, told in part by her daughter.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Leona Sharon Kinsey was born on December 15th, 1953. Her upbringing was on the tougher side, with money being in short supply in the family. But that eventually made her into a self-sufficient and creative adult. As for her family, Leona's dad had children from a previous relationship, and her parents had another child together. So she was raised in a big, blended family. Her daughter, Carolyn, who, as I just mentioned, kindly spoke to us for this episode, said the following about her mother's childhood.
The way she was raised, being self-sufficient, I think maybe food scarcity was a thing, back then. And especially my grandparents were not wealthy. They were older when they had her, like in their late 40s, early 50s. My uncle said no, like their parents were very gentle and caring and loving and provided, what they needed. They never did without. They didn't have nice things. And they didn't have anything that was not a necessity because they were poor, but they didn't ever go without.
Leona was enrolled with the Puyallup tribe of the Puyallup Reservation from Western Washington State. Now, according to the tribe's official website, the Puyallup tribe of Indians have lived along the shores of the Puget Sound in Washington State for thousands of years. The people of the tribe have been known for generous and welcoming behavior to all people who enter their lands. And they lived off the waters of the Puyallup River, fed by Mount Rainier. The Puyallup people fished, hunted, and traveled by these waters, using the western red cedar to make many things like homes, utensils, and canoes.
It's really hard to sum up like an entire person's, life and personality and all of that. But my mom was a member of the Puyallup tribe. She enjoyed the outdoors and hunting and fishing. And we spent a lot of our time outside, in the mountains or, just in the garden.
As an adult, Leona moved to La Grande, Oregon. She had a daughter, Carolyn, and raised her in a trailer park there. Leona loved animals. And Carolyn recalls always having pets growing up. Carolyn said that while they didn't have a lot of money, they were happy. Leona's creativity and ability to make a little go a long way, things she learned from growing up with scarcity, helped immensely when it came to raising her daughter to have everything she needed in life.
She was crafty and resourceful and creative. She enjoyed doing and always did a lot of different kind of craft projects. Now we call it like repurposing and upcycling, but we were poor. We didn't have, money for luxuries and new things. And so I rarely remember, having the money to go to the store and buy brand new clothes. A lot of it was garage sales or or thrift stores, but she always had an eye to find the neatest things there, which I think takes a gift. She was so independent. I don't think that there was anything that she ever depended on anybody to do for her. And often I can hear her say, I'll do it myself. So she didn't really feel that she had to have other people, to take care of her or validate her. She knew something about everything, kind of a jack of all trades. She worked hard and she kind of, I don't want to say required, but it was important to her that I work hard.
Leona was the type of person to help those around her who were struggling, even when she was struggling herself.
Her friends would always say, like still today, they say, your mom was so nice. Your mom gave me this, or your mom always helped me with food when I didn't have any money, or all of her friends always thought, that she would give the shirt off of her back for them. She didn't hesitate to help people. She had a lot of amazing qualities and gifts that she shared with folks.
Carolyn spoke briefly but openly with us about her mom's past trauma and self-medication using alcohol. She said that there were good and bad times. Leona self-medicated with drugs. That's something that will come up again later.
Carolyn remembers her mom having high expectations of her and having firm boundaries. They were because her mom cared and wanted her to do well in life and see success. For example, when her mom said no, that meant no with zero negotiating allowed. Carolyn discussed this with her uncle and came to the conclusion that Leona wanted her daughter to be tough and not cry over things that didn't warrant tears. Carolyn remembers her mom reasoning with her when she was upset, reminding her that she wasn't hurt or broken and that she was okay. Leona believed that there were things you cried over and things you didn't. When it came to the high expectations, Carolyn recalled her first job working alongside her mom at a local motel. Here's what she had to say about it.
For example, one of my first jobs, I was cleaning hotel rooms with her at a local motel. And before I started, she lectured me for a good, hour. And, you get in there and you do a good, thorough job, do it fast, don't cut corners and leave your room dirty. There's nothing like having to go clean somebody else's rooms and they're dirty. Just the more you can get done, in one swoop, less people will have to pull your weight. And basically don't embarrass me by being lazy, or at half-ass. And I remember after about a month, she had to do my rooms because you got an assignment, of your rooms. And so about a month later, she had to do mine. And she said, good job. I did your rooms and your rooms were really good. Good job. And that meant a lot to me because my mom's standards were pretty high.
Carolyn also remembers her mom instilling in her that being a good person was important.
She had a big heart and a lot of empathy and compassion for people. She used to always tell me, respect your elders. And I think above everything, to have integrity in what I do, to tell the truth and don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, and respect your elders, and I would get in some serious trouble if I accidentally disrespected an elder, didn't get up and give them my seat or stood in front of them or interrupted, a lot of just being polite. I feel like I got talked to about that a lot.
We mentioned earlier that Leona raised Carolyn as a single mom. Carolyn spoke about the two relationships that Leona was in as she was growing up. The first was with Carolyn's dad, and the second was with her stepdad. Despite neither relationship working out, Leona stayed friends with both of her exes, which allowed Carolyn to maintain positive relationships with both of her father figures.
She left my biological dad when I was about 3, maybe younger, 2, 3, and married my stepdad. But she married my stepdad and he was, they were both kind and patient and gentle men. And she spent the majority of our lives together with my stepdad. But they like to go out and drink and dancing and, to have bonfires and parties. And, nothing was really wild or crazy or out of control, but they didn't get along a whole lot after they drank. So, there was that aspect of life too, the uncertainty of having alcohol in the home.
It sounds like quite a bit of time with your stepfather before he finally left the picture.
Yeah. They remained friends. And, my dad, before my stepdad passed, he said, I always did. I still do love your mom, and he was never with anybody again after they separated. And even after they separated, when we would get together, hang out, or I would come into town to visit, we would go to my dad's and you wouldn't be able to tell that they weren't together. They still got along really well.
Later in life, Leona ran her own landscaping business. She was booked and busy, with her services booking out a week or more in advance. She was reliable and her clients knew that they could count on her. Leona was still living in La Grande, Oregon in a single-wide trailer house on Hall Street. As for Carolyn, she had moved out of the home. She was now living in Washington State and was now a mom too. That brings us to October 25th, 1999. 45-year-old Leona was supposed to meet a friend, Nancy, at Nancy's house, but she never made it. Nancy and Leona had been friends for years, meeting when Carolyn was in elementary school. They shared a lot of common interests, like foraging for mushrooms and huckleberries, fishing, and antique hunting. When Leona never showed up at Nancy's house, she got worried. So she tried to get a hold of Carolyn. But remember, this is 1999. Cell phones weren't as ubiquitous as they are now. Sure, some people had them, but those people were in the minority. Carolyn didn't have a cell phone, so Nancy tried a couple numbers to get a hold of her, including the restaurant Carolyn worked at. There, she left a message with one of Carolyn's coworkers. She shared with us what it was like getting that message, the best she can remember at least. She says it was a blur, which is understandable.
I woke up that morning and I cried all day. I didn't know why. I thought maybe I had PMS. I didn't know what was the matter. I kind of dealt with depression off and on, postpartum depression. And so I just thought something was wrong with me. I just cried literally over everything all day. And when I got to work, my coworker said, "We've got your shift covered. Go ahead, go ahead and go home. We've got it covered." And I didn't understand. I was like, "Well, I'm fine. I'm just having a bad day." She asked if I got the message, and I said no. And what message? We didn't have cell phones, and I hadn't been home. So she said somebody, my mom's friend Nancy, called and was trying to get a hold of me and was trying to find my mom, that my mom was missing, and she gave Nancy my phone number. So that was how I found out she was missing. And I called my mom's friend Nancy right away and from work, and I didn't believe anything was wrong. I thought, we didn't have reliable cars. Our cars all had a trick. You might have to get out and tap on the alternator, or they just all had a trick. None of them worked the way they were supposed to. And I thought there just must be a logical explanation. She had car trouble, or, flat tire or something. I didn't think that there was anything wrong. My mom was so independent and, always enforced in me, or tried to instill in me, to stand up for yourself and don't take any crap from anybody. And I didn't even think that something could have happened to her. So Nancy was concerned and said that she was worried. She was supposed to come over and she didn't. And so Nancy was worried because it wasn't like her to not come over at all, when she said she would. Nancy said she went to look for her and couldn't find her anywhere.
Desperate to go and help Nancy look for her mom, Carolyn, now a mom of 3, couldn't. She lived paycheck to paycheck and wasn't making ends meet as it was. There was never enough money for diapers and bills, putting food on the table. Missing shifts meant not getting paid, and as worried as she was, she had to be practical. There was no vacation or sick time that she could take, so she was stuck. So Carolyn did the only thing she could do. She called and paged her mom constantly, hoping for a reply.
I paged her. We didn't have cell phones. So I paged her and she didn't answer. And so I just kept paging her. And then I was more annoyed that she wasn't paging me back than I was worried. And so I started telling her, I have an emergency. One of the kids are sick. I need you to call me. And she, my mom had her problems. It's hard to say sometimes without making it sound bad, but she struggled with addiction. And as a way of coping, now that I'm older and I understand trauma and trauma responses, I know that she coped with her trauma that way. But as much as that addiction like manifests itself at certain times in her, in my life or in her life, she always stepped up to be a grandma or my mom. Like when I called her, if I needed her, she was there. There was no question. It didn't matter what was going on with her or in her life. If I needed her, she came. And so when she didn't return my calls, or when I told her something was wrong and the kids were sick, that she didn't call me, then I started to worry and kind of mostly irritated, but kind of worried. I finished working out the next couple days. Like I worked my shifts and just tried to get a hold of her. I kept calling her, kept paging her, and she didn't answer. But I remember working through this, like being at work and taking care of customers in the restaurant and crying and not being able to talk to anybody or tell anybody what was going on and not being able to not cry. Just my eyes just kept watering and I didn't know what to do. Our moms guide us through those hard times in our life. Like, who do you call when you don't know what to do? And my person to call when I don't know what to do was gone.
The only other thing Carolyn could do was file a missing persons report. According to some reporting, Leona went missing on October 24th. However, this is why I feel like it's so integral to work with families. Carolyn clarified it was actually the 25th, despite what some newspapers have reported. She filed the missing persons report on the 27th. And not long after that, Nancy, who had been able to search locally for Leona, found Leona's car, a light golden brown 1980s model GMC Jimmy. It was in an Albertsons parking lot.
Her friend Nancy found her car. Like Nancy searched for her. When my mom didn't show up to her house, Nancy went to my mom's house and went to their other friends' houses and went to, Denny's where they might go have coffee. She drove all the back roads looking for her to see if she broke down somewhere and then did it again and again. Like Nancy made her rounds and then she drove by, the Albertsons parking lot, which is kind of on a main street in town. And my mom's car was there. And so she called me right away that morning and was like, I found your mom's car. It's at the parking lot. It's here at Albertsons. She's not here. I'm going to sit here and wait for her. And so there was that anticipation, like, okay, when's she going to come out? When's she going to come back? And she didn't.
For those who aren't familiar, Albertsons is a chain of supermarkets that operates in 29 states under different names, such as Safeway and Randall's and many others.
After speaking with Nancy, Carolyn was able to piece together what happened in the lead up to her mom's disappearance.
It was evening. She told Nancy she was going to go meet John at Albertsons and she'd be over afterwards. And that was in the afternoon. And so I don't have times. I just know that the impression that I had gotten from Nancy was that she was going to be there that evening and she didn't show up. And so then Nancy, waited later into the night and then went and looked for her.
Now, I'm sure all of our listeners are wondering what I was wondering. With Leona's last assumed location at the Albertsons and her car being found in the parking lot, was it possible that her car had been there the whole time and had been missed during Nancy's searching? This is something Caroline was able to clear up for us as well. She acknowledged that while it was possible, it isn't likely. Nancy was very familiar with the car her best friend drove and knew what she was looking for. The store manager also said he didn't think the car had been there overnight before it was found. Now that the car had been found, police searched it, and they found that the steering column had been damaged and there was a box of rubber gloves in the footwell of the back seat. Apart from that, there was nothing else of note, no sign of a struggle, and certainly no clues as to where Leona was. Then, around a week after Leona was last seen, Carolyn managed to make the journey to La Grande.
After her car was found, it was several days later, like 3 or 4 days later, her car was found in the parking lot where she was supposed to meet John. Then I knew something was wrong. I just didn't really know what to think of it or what. Just I needed to know. I need to know where she is. I need to know what's wrong. I need to know why her car was there. But I didn't really know what to do still. It was about a week before I got paid and could go, drive to Oregon. And it's about a 5-hour drive, but I had little kids. So, I had to find somebody to watch them. And I ended up bringing my daughter, who was about 1.5, 2 at the time. So that's a long, 5-hour drive is about a 7-hour drive with a little kid. So I got, by the time I went home or went back to my mom's house, it had been about a week and a half, a week, standing in the front doorway and looking, at her boots and all of her coats and her clothes, her shoes lined up by the door, and just standing there for a minute, like invading her space. I felt like I just needed to, don't get into anything, just sit here and wait for her to get here. It really felt like I had gotten there and she was just at the store and hadn't come back yet. Like I was just going to have a seat and wait for her.
Carolyn looked around the cozy house and noticed that it looked like her mom had just ducked out for a few minutes. There was a pot of coffee on the coffee maker, bananas going bad on the table, and a new loaf of bread on the counter. There was milk in the fridge, and Carolyn found a full carton of cigarettes. Everything she saw suggested that Leona hadn't intended to leave for long. In fact, Leona's purse, keys, pager, and glasses were all in the house. Carolyn felt like her mom could walk in the door at any minute, but she never did.
It took me a couple hours to walk around. I felt like I was getting into stuff. Bedrooms to me have always been like a private, like my bedroom is private space. I don't go in at other people's bedrooms and I don't bring other people into mine. But I went in my mom's room and I laid down on her bed and I smelled her pillow, and I had cried so much, so hard for so long that my face was raw. My eyes were raw. I remember smelling her pillows and crying into them. And I rolled over and looked at there was a bookshelf next to her bed. And I looked at her bookshelf and looked down, and her purse was on the floor next to the bed. And I just knew, like, she would not have left her purse. There's no way she would have left her purse.
A little earlier in the episode, Carolyn mentioned that her mom potentially had been going to meet a man, John, the night she was last seen. Her reason for seeing John was drugs. Leona was involved in using, buying, and selling illegal substances, and she may have owed money to dealers.
John was a dangerous guy. I didn't know him. I'd never met him. I never even heard of him. But Nancy said that she was worried because there were rumors in town that my mom was working for the police, that she was an informant. And she was worried that if John knew that, or, that somebody might have done something to her because of that and the addiction and drugs. We know that she used to get drugs from him. Law enforcement would say that my mom was in that small town, she was a moderate dealer, drug dealer. And having that connection with John as her supplier would make sense.
Carolyn also believes that her mom was working as an informant for the police, which would have put her in a very dangerous situation if the wrong people found out about it.
The first thing I heard was that, from Nancy, was that she thought my mom was working for the police, that people thought my mom was an informant, and that was motive. So she was worried. Nancy told me somebody had spray painted narc on her house several days before a week or so before she disappeared. And my mom was really upset about that.
Although Carolyn strongly suspects that her mother's disappearance and presumed murder was linked to her working as an informant, this has never been confirmed by authorities. Carolyn asked the police directly during the investigation, but they denied that Leona was working with them. But Carolyn wonders, and I'm wondering, would they even tell her the truth? Another theory that Leona owed money has floated around. Carolyn isn't so sure about that, though.
Not that she owed anybody money. My mom was the kind of person like, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. I never knew her to borrow money. If she did, she would have done it from my stepdad. She had things still. She had belongings. She would have sold things.
While the police do consider John a person of interest, they don't know a lot about him, and neither do we. He was a man named Juan and went by John. He lived in Southern California from 1990 until 96, and he then moved to Salem, Oregon in 1998, and then finally La Grande in 1999. In the late 90s, he would have been associated with Leona. He was in his mid-30s, around 5'5" and 135 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. He was from Mexico, and because he was undocumented, when he was arrested for theft in 2006, he was deported. Before the arrest for theft and deportation, he was known to police and had been arrested for physical assault, third-degree rape, and third-degree sodomy. According to the Charlie Project, there are rumors that he may have been connected to a Mexican drug cartel.
Carolyn says she knows very little about this person. They had never met, and her mom's drug use was something she kept hidden.
I never met him. I didn't know anything about that aspect of her life. We'd had a falling out several years before that where I told her if she was going to continue, I can't have you in my life like this. And so she really tried to keep her addiction under control, and she kept that part of her life a secret, kept it away from me anyway. They weren't intimate. He was, from what I understand, he was, I wouldn't say a friend, like anybody that she could count on or that would do anything, for anybody. From what I've gotten by other people who knew Juan was he was abusive and controlling. And if he did anything for you, you owed him something, and he was going to collect, whether that was, in a beating or money or making you do something for him or rape, something. One of the rumors are that he had wanted to be intimate with her and she rejected him and he was mad, but I don't know that.
Despite funding and assistance from the Oregon State Police, the FBI, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, there has been no movement on the case, and the LGPD still considers it open. As I mentioned at the top of this episode, this October will mark 25 years since Leona was last seen. Carolyn believes that her mother was murdered that night, but that doesn't mean she's giving up hope that she'll find her mom.
This year's the 25th anniversary of her disappearance. Lissa Yellowbird Chase is a advocate, searcher, warrior. I don't know how to explain her other than a light at the end of the dark. Lissa Yellowbird Chase is a member of the MHA Nation or MHA Confederated Tribes, which she does a lot of searching. She has cadaver dogs and volunteers her time and money and resources to searching for missing Native people. And Lissa has agreed to come down with her dogs and search for my mom. So that's, we have to fundraise for that. We want to fundraise to increase the reward. My mom would be 70 this year. Wow. She would be 70 this year. So a lot of the people who were her age, who knew, who could have potentially known what happened, or have information or tips, or who even knew her to tell me about her, just tell me her stories. They're all pushing 70 or older. Many of them have passed away. Nancy's passed away. One of my mom's, another one of my mom's good friends has passed away. My dad has passed away. People who knew anything are leaving. So I'm hoping, that if we can increase the reward, that's motivation for them to tell us something.
With no body to bury, Carolyn has been unable to lay her mom to rest. There hasn't been a funeral or a service. That's something that will only happen when Carolyn is able to bring her mom home.
We've had a couple of kind of memorials or anniversaries, vigils. But I mean, you can't really have a funeral until, you can't properly lay them to rest until they're found. Part of me is torn, I know that she wanted to be out in the woods. So I kind of go back and forth. I would be happy to I wouldn't be happy. There would be some sense of a relief or readiness to move on to the next chapter, justice, accountability, if we found her. But I know that there is nowhere else she would rather be. If she couldn't be here with us, there's nowhere else she would rather be. She wouldn't want to be in a box somewhere with the evidence label. She wouldn't want to be in a cemetery. She wouldn't want to be, there's nowhere else she'd rather be. So why not just leave her? You know what I mean? That sounds bad, but I want to know where. I want to have a place to go to, to say goodbye. But I find comfort in that she would like it where she's at.
Caroline now dedicates her time to helping the families of other missing and murdered Indigenous women. She's using her unique experience and perspective to assist others. Carolyn spoke to us in hopes that someone who knows something will hear the episode and will call in a tip. Because as with all of these unsolved cases, someone knows something.
Right now, they're looking for, we know that there was one other person. Juan said he wasn't stupid enough to do it himself. So who is that other person? I guess that's my pressing question, is who is that other person? What's being done to find or identify them? But, the status right now is they're just looking for any and all information, witnesses that they can. It's still an open case. It's cold, but it's open.
At the time of her disappearance, Leona Kinsey was 5'2", 110 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. She was of Native American and Caucasian descent, with an almond-colored complexion. She had small scars on the outside of both feet and next to her pinky toes and pinky fingers. She had a tattoo on her bicep of a tomahawk and a peace pipe crossed over each other. She wore glasses. However, as we learned earlier, they were left at her house. If you would like more information, you can follow Finding Leona Kinsey on Facebook. If you have any information that can help bring this case to a resolution, please contact Lieutenant Jason Hayes at 541-963-1017. No tip is too small.
Make sure you follow us on all of our socials at the Murder Diaries Pod. And don't forget,
Stay safe.
bye.
Seeking the truth never gets old. Introducing June's Journey, the free-to-play mobile game that will immerse you in a thrilling murder mystery. Join June Parker as she uncovers hidden objects and clues to solve her sister's death in a beautifully illustrated world set in the Roaring '20s. With new chapters added every week, the excitement never ends. Download June's Journey now on your Android or iOS device, or play on PC through Facebook Games.